A little while ago, I made a vlog talking about what happens to the flow of energy in the meridians when an organ is removed. Um, and that's something that's quite relevant to quite a few people, because there are some different organs that sometimes people get removed from their bodies. In particular, the gallbladder, that's a common one, sometimes the spleen. Less commonly, sometimes people have kidneys removed and things like that. So on that vlog, someone asked, I guess, a follow-up question. And it's about, what if someone has a traumatic injury? So not to the organs, but to some other part of the body. What happens to the flow of energy through that part of the body then? So that's what I'm going to talk about in this episode of Chi Life. So in some ways, some of the same principles apply as to, what happens when an organ's removed, how that affects the flow of energy in the meridian. But there are some different factors here as well, because it's a different type of injury. Something happening to the external body rather than the internal body, and something possibly directly affecting the pathway of flow of energy through the body, the meridian itself. So one of the principles that does apply is, fortunately, our bodies have great capacity to adapt to different situations, to different adverse events. And our body, most of the time, will find a way to make things work. It will adapt and it will change, and it will find a way through things. A good analogy for a lot of the meridians, so there's different types of meridians in our body, so basically two different types. So one type of meridian relates very strongly to our organs, and these meridians, they flow like rivers, and it's a really good analogy on just a whole lot of levels of how those meridians function and what their characteristics are. There's another type of meridian, which the extraordinary meridians, and a better analogy for these is that they flow like ocean currents. They're vastly different in how they operate. And so those extraordinary meridians, those ocean currents, because the flow is so big, almost inevitably they're going to find a way to continue to flow. They can be disrupted to some degree, but it's big flows of energy. It's much more likely that it's the organ meridians that might be disrupted by some type of injury, and due to their nature, that they're much more prone to disruption. So that's primarily what I'll focus on in this vlog. So the example that this person gave in their comment was of someone having a partial amputation of their leg, so something pretty extreme. I'll start with something not quite that extreme, and then I'll get onto that later on. So I'll start with not necessarily an amputation, but just a cut, a large traumatic wound that cuts across some of the meridian pathways. So, for example, maybe you have a cut across here. This is going to affect a whole lot of meridians that flow through the arm. So basically, in terms of those organ meridians, there are 3 that run on the soft surface of the arm, and then there are 3 that run on the hard surface of the arm. And so depending where exactly the cut is, it's going to affect 1, 2, 3, 4, of those meridians. And again, these meridians, they tend to flow like rivers. So typically, if this sort of thing happens, if you imagine I had a cut across here, what would happen is, what would happen if in nature, if a river has something traumatic, something big happen to the earth through part of the section that it flows through. There's a whole range of things that could happen, and it's actually the same in our body. So if you imagine there was a landslide or an earthquake, or something like this. So say there was depending what we choose, there's different implications potentially. So say there was an earthquake, right? We'll go with an earthquake, and so it's really shaken the ground up. Maybe it's caused dirt or rocks and things to fall into the riverbed. Maybe it's also carved out some new dips and gouges in the land as well, right? So there's different ways that river will then change as a result of that. If it's completely blocked up, the river might stop flowing in that direction. It might build up, But eventually it will find a way around and through. But there might be an area where now there's a lake where the energy has pooled before it is able to flow around. This is something that can happen in the body, where energy builds up and often, might become stagnant and then finds a way around that obstacle within it. Sometimes, as a result of, again, rocks and things that have fallen into the river, even once it gets out to the other side, ideally it's going to flow back into that same pathway. But maybe if the ground has really been moved around, it might flow out and then actually go in a new path now, because of it's been pushed so far out of its course. And this can actually happen in our body as well with those meridians. Sometimes it will flow and it meets an obstruction, and then it actually ends up going, and it actually affects the rest of the pathway beyond that. The ideal is, and this is actually what happens most often within our body, that trauma that has disrupted the flow of energy, it might, at least temporarily, affect the flow around there, but eventually, in the ideal situation, it's actually going to find its way through in much the same pathway that it flowed in previously. It might go off course slightly, somewhat, getting around things because there's scar tissue it has to work around, but then it just basically goes back into the same pathway. And that would be like, maybe there's a whole lot of rocks in the river, and it's like, it has to go around a little bit, but then the riverbed is same on the other side, so maybe it finds its way back into the riverbed. And even eventually over time, with the flow of water, it might actually push some of those rocks away. They might carry on down the riverbed. That's what happens most often, but sometimes the effects can be greater than that. It can really, as I've said, it can cause the pathway to be pushed around, further down the track, or it can cause stagnancy around there and so on. So in those sorts of situations where the flow doesn't actually just find its way back to where it was, sometimes it doesn't actually matter. Sometimes it's fine. The body's found a way to flow, that's as healthy as it can be, given what's changed within the structure of the body, so no problem. Other times, when you have energy pooling or stagnating, or areas where the energy is not flowing into as freely as it should to keep those tissues healthy, that's where it can be really useful to consult with someone who understands the flow of energy in your body, to help to correct that as much as possible to make that flow healthy again. So the sort of person who could do this, so definitely someone who is very skilled in Qigong and ideally Qigong healing, because they'll be able to directly work with the energy, or a skilled acupuncturist may be able to do this. Very skilled acupuncturist. A lot of acupuncturists aren't necessarily, well, a very skilled one will be able to do it. They often aren't all that aware of actually what's happening with the flow of energy through the pathway sometimes, because they sometimes have a tendency to just remember what's on the charts and work off that, rather than actually what's actually happening. The chart says it should be this, but that's not actually what's happening. We need to deal with what's actually happening in order to correct it. So, but a very skilled acupuncturist will be able to do that. Those would be the main ones, I guess. A skilled Qigong practitioner, ideally someone with Qigong healing knowledge and skills, skilled acupuncturist. There might be some other practitioners, who have skills to help you with that. All right, so that's something less traumatic, but still maybe significant. But largely the limb is still in place, right? The example that this person asked about was a partial amputation of the leg. It's going to be easiest for me to show you on my arm rather than down on my leg, but so that we can discuss this. So, okay, this time, it's chopped right off. It's gone, right? So our body will adapt, right? Again, our body has great capacity to adapt. There's different ways that it might adapt, though, right? So ideally, it's going to heal over. That's going to join the skin together. It's going to seal off blood vessels and reroute the flow of blood vessels and so on, to, physically. But what's it going to do with the energy? There's a few different things that it can do. It may just completely adapt to this and just go, right, I've got nothing to work with beyond here, and it just like, okay, we'll flow to the end of this pathway, and then we'll just link up to the next one, and we'll just find a new pathway, link it all back up. much as it's going to do with the blood vessels and things like that. And so yeah, it just changes things and works with what's there. Sometimes it doesn't do that fully. And to understand this, it's helpful to understand that there are different components to our energy. So often when we talk about chi, we're talking collectively about a whole lot of different things that happen within our body, within our energy. We're talking about the heat, the electricity, the vibration, all these different parts, and they relate to the function of our nerves, our blood flow, the activity of our muscles, and so on through our body. But it is a combination of all those things. Sometimes, most of the time, those things all work together, and so it's adequate and useful for us to talk about chi collectively as a concept, and about, because all of these things influence each other, and so we can just talk about that all together. Sometimes they are out of step, out of sync with one another, and so in that case, certainly some parts of the chi, the energy, will just recirculate, because it has to, because you're not going to keep sending blood out through there, or you're not going to be alive for very long if you do. You're not going to, so aspects of your energy is just going to have to recirculate, and your body will find a way to do that. But sometimes there's other components of the energy that it continues to extend through the space where the tissue was before, so in this case the hand. And this is where you get things like it's commonly referred to as phantom limb syndrome, where the person still in some sense feels that they have that amputated part of their body that's no longer there. So most parts of the energy are recirculating, but some parts still extend out into it. And this relates very much to the neural mapping of our body's understanding of what's there. And so it still continues to send some parts of the energy resources out there. Again, obviously not the blood flow or things associated with that. That often is not necessarily a bad thing. That can be okay. That can be just part of how the body's adapted, and it still has, some what's the word? It has like an image, a footprint left behind of the part that was there, and that can lead to some interesting effects. So, for example, if someone is working using acupuncture, and someone has a phantom limb, they can use a needle, and the same with qigong therapy as well, on the area where the limb would have been, even though it's not there anymore, to affect the energy flow through the rest of the body. So that's not a bad thing. That can be useful. It can also be problematic when someone, yes, they have the phantom limb, and it's causing them, they're having pain, they're having issues with that tissue that's not actually there anymore. And in those cases, it can be a case of unblocking some of the energy flow to relieve that pain, and so that the phantom limb can remain, and that's okay. Or it can be a case of re-educating the body's system, the body's neurology, so that it understands that actually that's not there anymore, and it starts to recirculate all of the parts of the energy. Including the ones that it was sending out to create that phantom limb. So yeah, a little bit of a it's an interesting case. I guess there's a significant number of people who have different parts of their body amputated, and for the most part the body will just naturally adapt, right? There are some times when it doesn't manage to do that in a fully healthy way. And sometimes it is then helpful to give the body some training, some coaxing, some encouragement, some guidance into to adapt in a way that is more healthy for the ongoing health of the rest of the organism. All right, so that's I think that's enough on that topic. Hopefully that was helpful, useful, certainly to the person who asked that question, and maybe to some other people as well. If you've liked the vlog, if you've enjoyed it, please like, comment, subscribe, share, all those good things, and I look forward to seeing you on another one soon.